Okay, let's move on. Before we even start the planning, I want you to consider the timing. Some of you probably know that in the IELTS test, we are given 40 minutes, about 40 minutes, to write the essay, to write the task 2. And while you're preparing, you should think carefully how exactly you want to spend those 40 minutes. The general consensus about my students is that about 5 minutes should be allocated to the planning. Well, 5 minutes is probably the maximum time you should allocate to planning, because there is also writing the draft and proofreading, etc. But even before you actually start planning, which happens, of course, before you start writing your essay or writing your first draft even, you should probably think carefully about the following. Am I sure that I understood the task? You will not believe how many of my students, especially at the beginning of working on preparation, in the middle of writing an essay, cannot answer this simple question. Do you remember the topic that you're writing on? What were you asked? They have to check. Let me repeat that. You should very carefully read your task. Let's look at the example. So this is the task I've already shown you. When choosing a job, the salary is the most important consideration. To what extent do you agree or disagree? I've been looking at this topic for hours while I was preparing the course. Let's see if I can remember it. I'm covering the topic, and let me try repeating it. When choosing a job, the salary is a very important consideration. To what extent do you agree or disagree? Was I right? No, I wasn't. Even though I actually have it underlined, I forgot that it said most important, not just very important consideration. Now, is there a big difference between the most important consideration and a very important consideration? For a 6.0 essay, it's not really. But for a 7.0 essay, it's critical. And if you're aiming at a 7.0, this is the technique that I highly recommend. I call it cover and recite. So what you do is you just cover the topic with your hand and you try reciting it. What does it actually say? Say it out loud or write it down. Let's give it a go. So I'll give you 10 seconds or so to look at this task again, and then I'll cover it. And then you might pause the video and try writing it down as you remember it. Okay? So have 10 seconds or so to look at it. Okay. I'm covering it now, and you may either repeat it out loud or write it down. Okay, I'm going to uncover it now. Check yourself. Did you get it right? let me repeat it again. Reading carefully and understanding your topic is the first step in writing a good essay. Now, let's move on. In the previous video, in the previous recording, we talked about presenting a clear position. Both 6.0 and 7.0 require you to present a relevant position to the question, your opinion to the question. In this case, I suggest that your position should be present in the introduction, in the very first paragraph that that appears on the paper, right? Because it's not the first paragraph that you should write, but we'll get to that a bit later. Now, we're going to look at an essay that one of you has very kindly allowed me to use. And we're going to look at the introduction only for now. I'd like you to look at it and tell me whether whether this introduction has a clear opinion. Let's look at it together. There has been an unprecedented surge in the number of job options available now as compared to the past. Many experts believe that job satisfaction is the most prominent factor while opting for a job. While on the contrary, some argue that compensation is predominant, as no one can sustain a healthy lifestyle without money. This essay concedes with the former statement and would expound both the statements in the subsequent paragraphs. Does this introduction have an opinion clearly expressed? I think it does, even though it's a bit impersonal, which is fine. It says, this essay concedes with the former statement. So basically, the author says, compensation is predominant. So we can see that the author basically agrees with the statement that compensation is the most important consideration while choosing a job. But there is something else. Can you spot it? Can you spot something that the author included in the introduction, which is not in the task itself? Here is a hint. It's in the second sentence. Did you notice it? Many experts, says the author, believe that job satisfaction is the most prominent factor while opting for a job. While this is true, I would say this is irrelevant. By including this statement in the introduction, the author creates this kind of dichotomy between job satisfaction and financial side of things that is just not there in the task itself. Do you see what I mean? Although you're required to address all parts of the task, this kind of irrelevant information might actually lower your task achievement score. So if we cover the task itself, I'd say the author would say something like this. When choosing a job, compensation is more important than job satisfaction. And the author agrees with that. They say, yeah, this essay concedes with the former statement that no one can sustain healthy lifestyle without money. So money is most important. But again, satisfaction versus compensation is just not what the task asks, I'm afraid. And this is a good example of why it is important to actually read the task first thing. Because without it, without understanding it, you might just choose the wrong path to go. And although for a 6 or even 6.5, it could be, it could work, for a 7, there is absolutely no way. So, putting it aside for a moment, I'm just going to give you some practice. Here are some topics, here are some tasks that are going to appear in your first written assignment. Right now, you may stop the video and try the cover and recite technique. As you can see, these two different tasks have different questions, which is also very important to remember about, and you may try writing down or just saying out loud what exactly the tasks say. Then check if you really remember them correctly.